Great. Okay, so should we move forward?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to talk very quickly about some of the theoretical and practical implications of the creative problem-solving thinking skills model. So we're going to specifically go into what we think are some of the positive outcomes associated with the thinking skills model, and that's sort of going to look back and also take into consideration of our current experience in working with the thinking skills model. And then after that discussion, we're going to move into more of our unfolding, evolving thinking as we're working on the second edition. So let me take the first two. So one of the observations, experiences I've had in using creative problem solving, both applying it myself and also training others in it, relates to the first item that you see on the screen. So it allows for greater articulation of the qualitative distinctions found among the steps of the creative problem solving process. So what does that mean? I have found that for me personally, as I have moved through the steps of the creative problem solving process, let's take, for example, moving from defining the problem and thinking about what are the challenges here, how might I, or in what ways might I. As I've moved from that step of the process to then idea generation, so what might I do now that I've defined my problem, I have felt sort of a qualitative shift. That problem definition has a different feel to it than idea generation. It's a different kind of focus, a different kind of thought process, a different quality about it. So part of what we wanted to do in the thinking skills model, by drilling down into the cognitive and affective skills, was to describe what was qualitatively going on in each of the steps of the process. So that's one benefit. Two, and this sort of flows from number one, given that we can broaden the instructional methods used to teach and train creative problem solving by incorporating additional approaches designed to promote thinking and affective skills. So if we think about what's happening in creative problem solving, and we are able to articulate the kinds of skills that we wish to develop or are necessary in engaging in creative problem solving, we can bring in other experiential activities to get at those skills, to help people develop those skills, whether they're cognitive or affective skills. So it broadens how we can engage others in terms of helping them to be proficient at creative problem solving.
I'd like to take a stab at 3, 4, and 5, and I want to first lump them together just a little bit by saying that what we're talking about here is, in general, is a relationship between thought and language. If any of you have any background and have done any reading of Vygotsky, for example, you know, he really made a lot of that very clear early on, and made the case, which is true, as you think, so you solve. And if you read books about creative problem solving, there are always catchphrases about, you know, a problem half well stated is a problem half solved. And then you have phrases like, well, creative problem solving is a cognitive, rational, and semantic process. But the point would be that we're talking about a process that is related to language and words. It's related to other things, but it primarily lands into that. And so I think 3, 4, and 5 sort of target themselves right within that whole thought language process. So looking at 3, if you think to improve the impact, and Gerard hit on that earlier on, if you want to improve your understanding and the impact and the value of things, you need to broaden out your theoretical approach to it and the language that is around that, and help folks understand better what is actually going on in their thinking and the relationship to that. Technically, the variety of CPS models that you've seen before and the thinking skills model, as you see it in one graphic, are theoretical models, and they have what I consider to be a small set of language around them. Sometimes when people are coming into it new, they say, oh, there's too much language or it's too specialized. I don't particularly agree with that, but I do know that anytime you learn something new, all the language seems different. So there was like this specialized stuff that you had to know or you had to speak in a language in order to get into the thought process theoretically. So by broadening that, we felt that we could improve the impact and the value of training itself because it gave us more of a language with which to reach people and a language of thinking to go along with it. That plays off the fact that once you get a name for something, then you're better able to do an objective, something specific that you can learn and teach. And associate that back with what's going on in CPS as opposed to here's CPS, here's the outcome, here's nothing in between that we have any words for. So your learning objectives can be targeted much more specifically. It's kind of like the old Mark Twain quote where he says, the difference between a word and the right word is like the difference between lightning and lightning bug. And so if you've ever been struck by lightning and or a lightning bug, you probably can get the difference in what it means to be specific about what it is you want to say and learn. And then number 5 also relates to the whole thought and language thing, because if you're going to internalize, in other words, if you're going to make it yours and not just a language you're parroting to somebody else because you saw it in a model or you worked through it or you saw somebody else do it, if you're going to understand what it is that was said and that becomes a part of your thinking, then you need to transfer and link that, not just to creative problem solving itself, to other things. Gerard mentioned this earlier when he was talking about the connections to leadership. And we have seen, and I certainly have seen it across a whole variety of fields, and if you look, you'll see it too, that the language that is being spoken in design thinking, in leadership, in thinking skills, in other specific contents oftentimes, is a process language that you would recognize as creativity and creative problem solving. But it was non-translatable in our opinion. And so we tried to do those things with it in terms of benefits by expanding it.
Terrific. Thanks, Mary. Okay, so I'll pick up and build from there. The next bullet, I'm going to break up number 6. Talks about shifting creative problem solving, the model from a mechanical process framework more towards a meta model. Let me talk a little bit about my own experience. When I first learned creative problem solving, way back before the computer and cars.
I think there were dinosaurs roaming the
earth. Yeah. When I learned creative problem solving back in the early 80s, the way that I learned creative problem solving was at a more individual, personal development, personal growth, self-discovery orientation. That was sort of the approach. When I went through the graduate program sometime after that and got my master's degree, there was a lot of work being done with organizations and training around creative problem solving, using it in consulting work with large corporations and in school districts. And so it had a very external orientation, very external focus. And as happens in life, you know, we swing one direction and we realize we're out of balance, and then we swing back the other direction. There's an old phrase that you don't get voted into office, you get voted out of office, because there's that swing of the pendulum to try to keep things in balance. So part of what was behind the shift in the thinking skills model and drilling down into the cognitive and affective skills was to try to strike a balance between creative problem solving is something that you do to other people, as in you facilitate other people through it, as well as it should be part of who you are. And I've noticed on some occasions students who have gone through our sequence of courses in creative problem solving, who in the classroom environment are very good at applying the guidelines, let's say, for example, of divergent thinking, but then outside the class are criticizing each other or talking behind each other's backs. And it struck me as and not that I've never done that, that, you know, we're missing something here. That if creative problem solving is strictly viewed as something that you do and apply with others, but not necessarily something that you internalize, and we're really missing an opportunity. And so part of getting at the affective skills and the cognitive skills is to help people to recognize to what degree am I internalizing this not as a model, but as a state of being. You know, to what degree do I defer judgment? To what degree am I really living a curious, open-minded lifestyle? To what degree do I embrace ambiguity and so forth? And later on, Mary's going to get into the skills. So I'll stop by saying part of what's behind this is that internalizing creative problem solving and connecting it back to leadership, our feeling is that when you do that, you more positively influence others and your context as you interact with them. Like my older son especially, a few years ago saying to me at the dinner table, you know, Dad, you don't talk like other dads. Well, Gabe, what do you mean I don't talk like other dads? Well, you ask us lots of questions. Really? Like, what do you mean? Well, you know, like, when Anthony and I are fighting, you say things like, well, how else might you resolve this? And so what that reflected back to me was, gosh, I can't escape my training. And it's nice to know that it has resulted in some positive behavioral influence, or an influence on my behaviors as a parent, which I think is an important set of leadership skills. So, by way of example. Second part of that bullet then goes on and says, moving towards a meta model capable of assisting individuals and groups in identifying the kind of thinking necessary to be successful in a wide variety of situations. A lot of words. So what does that boil down to? Boils down to this: everything's a process. Driving here today, I had to go through a process. I went through a series of steps to get here. Sitting down in a chair is a series of steps that you go through. Brushing your teeth, planning for this session for me is a process. And part of what we want to do with creative problem solving is help people recognize, especially when you're exerting leadership, because leadership, it's an ongoing process. You're always involved in interacting with others, making decisions, solving, you know, sometimes for me, before I get my key in the door, when I walk down the hall of Chase, you know, I'm hit with several, you know, this happened over the weekend, or here's an issue that a student came up with. I'm involved immediately in solving problems. And part of what we want to do is help people to recognize that you're always engaged in a process, and through metacognition, being able to stand above the situation, think about, okay, gosh, if I'm involved in this process right now, what kind of thinking, what's going to assist me right now to most effectively deal with this situation? Do I need to engage in clarifying? Do I need to be thinking about how to take something that's been proposed and provide feedback on it and evolve it into a solution? As the person who's presenting whatever the task or situation to me, do they need me to assist them in navigating whatever context or environment they wish to have the solution accepted or the idea accepted? So part of what we want to do is help people to recognize their own thinking and to stand above their thinking and to look and see if how they're thinking, as well as where they are with their affect, does it match the situation? Is it appropriate? And I think I'm doing number 7 also, right? Okay. So number 7 serves as an organizing framework for problem-solving tools, thus allowing the CPS model to draw in a greater variety of methods and strategies from other fields. There have been some tangible outcomes with respect to this particular shift in the thinking skills model. Once you specify a skill in this case I'm going to target the thinking skill in a specific step, what it does for you, and we want to be clear, we're not saying it's the only thinking skill, we're saying it's a primary thinking skill in that step. Once you do that, you now open yourself up to reach out to lots of other tools that are out there in other fields, such as project management or total quality and so forth. So, for example, if in exploring the vision, you're engaging in visionary thinking, why limit ourselves to our own past practice? When I was going through the graduate program, we had, Mary, you might remember this, remember the 8-pack? We called it the 8-pack. We had 8 divergent tools we learned, and we had 8 convergent tools we learned, and that was creative problem solving. And by moving to saying, no, gosh, you know, if this is what you want to achieve, this kind of thinking, well, go get any tool that helps you to do that, because there are lots of people out there who have written books and developed programs around strategies that help you to engage in a certain kind of thinking. That's all a tool is. It's a way of organizing your thinking and a particular kind of thinking to achieve some task. So tangible outcome of that, and I want to give a shout out to Laura Barbero-Switalski, who did her master's project. She's really been another partner in the thinking skills model. Laura, for her master's project, went out, took the thinking skills, and by the way, she also helped us by working with focus groups to get feedback on from master creative problem solvers. Are the thinking skills that we've articulated, are they accurate? Do they make sense? So we got lots of feedback. And then she went out and said, okay, if these are accurate, where else can we draw tools from? And now, as a consequence, for several years now, we have a new elective course, the CRS 614 course, that intentionally draws on and brings in other tools to help bring to light this notion of you know, a more inclusive, a meta model, that creative problem solving can be a meta organizer for lots of tools. And that brings us to number 8.
Number 8. Number 8 is about leadership, and that one of the benefits that we see, both practical and theoretical, is that we are actually explicitly saying, here are leadership skills that will assist you in the role that you have or in the function that you have in terms of leadership. And go back to the key reasons that I mentioned before, that we can actually say, here's a reason why this would be helpful to you. There's a lot in the literature about change and how leaders need to be responsive to change. Well, how do you become responsive to change? Well, one of the things that would be helpful would be if you have good diagnostic skills and that you have the ability to think in a way that examines, well, what's going on? This is different from what I learned, you know, when I was in school. When you think about all the technology now that is out there that people are using, well, what does that mean for our business or for our classroom? What helps, what hinders, what do I need to know? So as a leader or in a leadership position, leadership role, you're able to then say, well, it would be helpful to me if I learned better how to use these kinds of skills. And also when I'm always intrigued by the group process where people come out of a group and say, well, that didn't work very well. You know, the committee structure for doing work, and people say, well, that was a waste of my time. And I ask, well, what kind of leadership did you provide for helping that group to accomplish what it is that it needed to do? If you are aware of leadership skills in any situation where you are, you can in fact come to the forefront and say, well, I think we're not making a lot of progress. You know, we've got what it is we need to do, and having some tactical thinking skills, you see that what would help this group to move forward is if perhaps we got a plan of action together. You bring that to the group, and again, you may not be the formal leader here, but because you have those skills, you are able then to move forward. What's helpful to us in teaching and training is that we can say explicitly, here are pieces that will be helpful to you. If you enhance your skills here, it will help you in terms of your leadership role or in any leadership capacity. So that's really, as we look at that benefit, and that the complexity, again, creative problem solving is all about that novelty, that uniqueness, that things that leaders have never experienced before are suddenly happening. So what do you do about that? So that is where that comes into play and is very beneficial. We're using creative problem solving in our leadership programs that we do here on campus and helping those who are either in leadership positions or who are interested in leadership learn some of these skills, and we can explicitly say to them, here's how this will be helpful to you.